They tell you to speak up, to assert yourself, to stand tall and be loud. They say confidence is expressed through voice, posture, presence. But I'll tell you something they never will. The most dangerous man in any room is not the one who speaks the most. It's the one who says nothing and makes everyone else uneasy with his silence. You think calmness is soft? You think composure is passive? Then you've never truly met a man who cannot be provoked. You've never stood in the presence of one who hears the insult, sees the bait, feels the heat, and chooses to remain still, because the truly confident man does not prove his power, he contains it, and what is contained becomes unpredictable. What is unpredictable becomes feared. You've been conditioned to believe that power must be loud to be real, that if you're calm, you're weak, that if you don't react, you don't care. But Machiavelli saw through this centuries ago. He wrote not for the comfortable, but for those willing to wield power with surgical precision. He understood that the calm man is not indifferent, he's calculating. That stillness is not surrender, it's supremacy held in reserve. Because the moment you react, you become visible. You reveal your emotional map, you show them what moves you, what breaks you, what you need, and need is the birthplace of weakness. But the man who can hold the insult in his chest and let it burn without flinching, the man who can walk away without a word while others rage, the man who watches in silence while the world tries to provoke him, that man owns the frame. That man is remembered, feared, respected, because his power is not in what he says, but in what he refuses to give away. So I'm asking you this. Can you sit in tension without explaining yourself? Can you be misunderstood and not rush to defend your reputation? Can you be insulted and not answer? Because if you can't, you're not calm. You're emotionally dependent on the world's approval, and until you break that need, you'll never rule. The men who lead do not speak first. They observe, they calculate, and when they finally move, the world calls it destiny. That's what we're here to explore. The power of calm not as peace, but as pressure, not as virtue, but as strategy. The most dangerous thing a man can be is calm. And after today, you'll know why. Do not mistake calm for kindness. Do not confuse stillness with submission. A man who is calm is not always gentle, and very often, he is the most dangerous presence in the room. You were trained to believe that calm men are agreeable, that composure means softness, but I will correct that lie with surgical force. A man who is truly calm has already assessed you, measured your threat, and chosen not to waste his energy on reaction. That is not kindness, that is control. In The Prince, I made it clear, the ruler must know how to appear virtuous when necessary, but never be ruled by virtue. Calm is not a moral stance, it is a calculated decision. The loud man must convince you he has power. The calm man makes you wonder what kind of power he's hiding. And that silence, that refusal to show all his cards, creates a fear no volume can replicate. This calmness becomes your greatest weapon when you understand what it does to others. It unsettles them. It exposes their need for control. When they insult you and you don't react, they feel insecure. When they test you and you don't respond, they feel small. Why? Because they were counting on your reaction to define their status, and now, without it, they are lost. That's the beginning of your advantage. When a woman pushes your buttons and you don't flinch, she feels your weight. When a rival attacks your name and you don't defend it, he begins to doubt his own position. When people gossip, provoke, challenge, escalate, and you hold still, they begin to orbit around you, trying to decode the silence that never answers. And in that stillness, your power multiplies. You must understand this. The calm man never gives his enemy a clear target. If you show outrage, you become predictable. If you explain yourself, you become readable. If you react emotionally, you become vulnerable. But if you remain still, if your pulse never rises, if your tone never shakes, they can't get a grip on your center. You are no longer a person they can manipulate. You become a presence they must navigate around. And that is when power begins, not when you scream, not when you assert, but when you refuse to be moved. The greatest rulers, seducers, and tacticians throughout history, they didn't command attention with volume. They commanded it with gravity. They spoke less, moved slower, and waited longer, and in doing so, they bent the room to their rhythm. You do not need to be the loudest man. You need to be the man no one can shake. Weak men expose themselves not with their beliefs, not with their failures, but with their emotions. You want to know who can't be trusted? Watch for the man who always reacts, who always needs to speak, who cannot sit in tension without trying to control it. These are the men who collapse when tested, who betray themselves when pressed, because the man who is owned by his emotions will always be owned by someone else. He thinks his honesty is strength. He thinks just being real is a virtue. But when he spills every reaction, when he texts in panic, explains after rejection, justifies himself when no one asked, he is not being real. He is confessing his need, and need to those who understand power is blood in the water. It invites the predator. It guarantees defeat. I do not speak these words to humiliate. I speak them to wake you up. Every time you explain yourself to someone who disrespected you, you give them leverage. Every time you chase someone who pulled away, you teach them that your emotions are for sale. Every time you over-communicate, over-apologize, or over-express, you mark yourself as a man who is not centered, but a man who is seeking to be stabilized by others. And let me tell you what Machiavelli teaches about such men. They are tools. They are pawns. They are manipulated by the more restrained, the more calculated, the more composed. They are led by fear, by flattery, by illusion, because they never learned the art of controlling their own temperature. The prince who rules does not react to rumors. He lets them spread. He does not answer every challenge. He lets the challenger expose himself. He does not respond to every emotional shift in the court. He waits, and the longer he waits, the more everyone else begins to tremble under the weight of their own uncertainty. Now look around. Look at your own life. When was the last time you gave away power just by trying to be understood? When did you let someone in because you wanted to seem kind, only to be betrayed later? When did you react too fast, defend too hard, explain too much, and regret it? That is not confidence. That is emotional exposure, and it is the currency of the weak. So what must you do instead? You must become unreadable. You must develop what Machiavelli admired most in a ruler, the ability to wear any mask and reveal none, the ability to observe without being pulled, to listen without reacting, to see the insult and offer nothing but stillness in return. Because here is the truth. The calm man sees everything. He hears every lie. He feels every shift in the room, but he doesn't show it, and that is what makes him dangerous. The weak man signals his weakness by reacting. The strong man signals his power by not needing to. In politics, in seduction, in war, there is one law that separates the rulers from the ruled. He who acts second often acts best. Stillness is not a lack of motion. It is the refusal to be pulled out of position by chaos. And in Machiavellian strategy, that refusal becomes the foundation of dominance. The world trains men to respond. Be quick, be loud, be emotional. But the man who can remain still while others panic? That man holds the center, and from the center all things orbit. When I wrote The Prince, I didn't advise rashness. I advised patience with calculation. A prince who moves too quickly reveals his plan. A prince who reveals his plan invites resistance. But the prince who waits, who listens to the noise, measures the intentions behind flattery, watches the faces behind the masks, he becomes the architect of the outcome before the others even know they've been maneuvered. Stillness is how you see. Action blinds you. Reaction betrays you. Silence reveals everything. Consider this. When two armies face one another, which general holds the advantage? The one who attacks first out of pride? Or the one who lets the other charge, overextend, and expose their flanks? The same applies to every power game you will ever play. In relationships, she pushes you to react, to prove you care, to break posture. But if you remain still, controlled, grounded, present without pursuit, she becomes the one who shifts. Because emotional stillness is not absence. It is mystery, and mystery creates gravity. People fear what they cannot read, and that fear turns into respect when your restraint becomes consistent. You become a variable they cannot predict, and therefore cannot control. And that, control of perception without overt force, is the highest form of power Machiavelli ever described. Stillness is also the filter. When you do not react, people show their true nature. The loyal stay, the disloyal escalate, the manipulative unravel. Your refusal to engage becomes the test, the mirror, the trap. Why speak when silence makes them confess? Why fight when calmness makes them sweat? And when you finally do act, when you speak, when you move, when you strike, it lands like thunder because it was preceded by the stormless silence of a man who knew exactly when to hold back and exactly when to conquer. So if you want to be feared without cruelty, if you want to be desired without performance, if you want to win without begging to play, stop reacting. Sit still. Let the court go mad. Let them guess what you're thinking. Let them question whether you've noticed their insult. Because the longer you wait, the more they break themselves trying to read a man who moves only when he's ready. The frame is not what you say. It is what you hold. It is the invisible boundary that defines who bends and who commands. And in every interaction, whether with a woman testing your masculinity, a rival mocking your silence, or a crowd watching to see what you'll do, someone holds the frame and someone surrenders it. Most men, though they believe themselves composed, lose the frame the moment they try to protect it. They defend their name. They explain their decision. They argue their worth. And in doing so, they reveal that their power was external all along, fragile, borrowed, conditional. But the calm man, he never defends the frame. He is the frame. His stillness becomes the law of the room. His non-reactivity becomes the mirror that exposes everyone else. The moment someone attacks him and he doesn't blink, they begin to panic. Why didn't he flinch? Why didn't he fight? Why isn't he defending himself? Because the calm man knows this truth. If I react, I admit that your opinion holds weight. If I stay still, I force you to doubt your own. The man who holds the frame never raises his voice to be heard. He never adjusts his tone to be liked. He doesn't rush to explain when misunderstood, because power doesn't come from being understood. Power comes from being unshakable, and when you are unshakable, people begin to orbit around you, not because you ask them to, but because stillness, like gravity, pulls everything toward it. In romantic dynamics, this is fatal. Women test men not to break them, but to locate them. She raises her tone, she pulls back, she plays the game, not because she hates you, but because she's trying to find your edge. And most men reveal that edge too soon. They get jealous. They become reactive. They try to negotiate attraction, but the calm man doesn't chase. He doesn't collapse into noise. He simply holds the frame and lets her recalibrate to the tempo of a man who doesn't need to explain why he's valuable. This is why Machiavelli praised appearances over explanations, because men judge more by the eye than the hand. In other words, it's not what you feel, it's what you show. The man who shows no desperation, no emotional volatility, no need for external confirmation, that man becomes an authority not through argument, but through posture. And that's what holding the frame truly is. It's not about being dominant, it's about being immovable. It's the quiet confidence that others begin to sink to, even against their will. And the more you hold that frame, calm, slow, heavy, the more the world begins to treat you as if you were born to lead, born to rule, born to be followed. So remember this: the one who reacts loses. The one who explains loses. But the one who remains still, he rewrites the outcome without saying a word. To become calm, you must train yourself in the art of emotional starvation. That means refusing to feed the world with your impulses. It means denying yourself the short-term pleasure of being heard in order to gain the long-term leverage of being feared, because calmness is not a natural gift. It is a forged state, hammered in the fire of deliberate discomfort and cooled in the waters of calculated restraint. The first tactic is delay. Delay your reactions. Always. When someone says something offensive, delay your answer. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 if needed. Why? Because reaction is a slave's instinct. Delay is the mark of a sovereign mind. When you delay, you force the other person into uncertainty. They begin to wonder if they struck a nerve. They begin to second-guess themselves. And most importantly, you regain the ability to choose your move rather than be driven by it. The second tactic is controlled breathing. Not for peace, for command. Your breath is the anchor of your presence. When you slow your breathing, you stabilize your voice, your gaze, your posture. You appear not just composed, but in control of time itself. Do this in arguments, in high-stakes negotiations, in seduction. Control your breath, and you control the room's tempo. The third tactic is non-response. Silence is a sword, but it must be sheathed with intention. Use non-response when someone disrespects you publicly. Use it when an old lover tries to provoke you through absence. Use it when someone offers bait, hoping you'll flinch. Let them sit in their own discomfort. Most people, especially manipulators, cannot survive silence. They crave confirmation that their tactics landed. Deny it. Let them panic in your calm. Fourth, ritualized solitude. Spend time alone, every day, doing nothing reactive. No phone, no stimulation, just presence. This isn't about peace, it's about edge. Because when you teach yourself to sit in silence without needing dopamine, you begin to separate from the average man. You gain endurance. You become the kind of man who can walk into a storm and keep his pulse steady, not because he's numb, but because he has trained for war. Fifth, withhold strategy. Never announce your next move. Calm men are dangerous because they are unreadable. If you're always telling people what you're planning, what you're feeling, what you're working on, you kill your mystique. Be vague. Be hard to pin down. Let others guess. This confuses your enemies and excites your allies. And more importantly, it teaches the world that your calm is not emptiness. It's strategy under lock and key. Last, practice graceful exits. When a conversation turns disrespectful, walk away. When a room becomes chaotic, remove yourself. When a woman tests you beyond your standard, leave without explanation. A calm man does not argue boundaries. He sets them by absence. He doesn't beg for peace. He removes his presence and lets the weight of that absence define the terms. All of these tactics require pain tolerance. You will feel the need to explain, to respond, to correct, to prove. Resist it, because every time you do, you sharpen the blade of stillness. And soon, that blade won't just protect your power, it will project it. Because in a world addicted to reaction, the man who moves slow becomes the man they follow. Let me give you an example, not from theory, but from history. A prince who mastered calm not as temperament, but as a weapon. Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, the man I observed, admired, and studied when I wrote The Prince. Cesare was not the most loved, he was not the loudest, but in his silence he created terror. In his restraint, he dismantled entire families, not through rage, through calculation, through waiting. When Cesare's power was threatened by rebellious nobles, men who praised him to his face but conspired behind his back, he did not rage. He did not arrest them publicly. He did not lash out in fury to prove he was strong. He smiled. He welcomed them to court. He pretended not to know, and for weeks he held his tongue. Because Cesare understood what the weak never do. Reaction is a gift to your enemy. Stillness is the noose they tighten around their own neck. He invited the conspirators to a banquet in Senigallia. Lavish, welcoming, no tension in his voice, no fire in his eyes. And when they arrived, disarmed by his calmness, thinking they had won, he had them executed, clean, surgical, without a scream. That is how calm becomes control. That is how stillness becomes fatal. It wasn't the sword that made Cesare feared. It was the fact that you never knew when he would draw it. This, too, is the lesson for the modern man. You don't need to destroy people, but you must learn from Cesare the power of restraint. You must never react immediately to betrayal. You must never punish in a rush. Let them think you didn't notice. Let them think they're safe. And in the silence, observe everything. Who speaks? Who shifts? Who sweats? Then when the moment comes, when the timing serves your position, you act swiftly, coldly, once. That is what separates the truly powerful from the impulsively emotional. They don't need to prove strength. They let the illusion of safety set in. Then they move once, and the entire field changes. Calmness, when combined with timing, becomes devastation. So ask yourself, can you wait like Cesare? Can you invite the man who insulted you back into your presence, not with warmth, but with the confidence of a man who knows exactly when to strike? Can you look your betrayer in the eye, smile, and wait for weeks, months, even years, because your memory is long and your anger is cold? This is not cruelty. This is Machiavellian realism. This is the art of ruling emotion rather than being ruled by it. Because the moment you move without emotion is the moment they begin to fear your stillness more than your words. You've been told your whole life to be confident, to stand up straight, to speak clearly, to be assertive, but no one ever taught you the deeper law, the law that separates men who are heard from men who are obeyed. the law that separates the performative from the strategic. The calmest man in the room is not the weakest, he is the most dangerous. Because his calm is not born of peace, it is born of discipline. It is born of having mastered the most violent animal in his life, himself. The world does not reward noise, it rewards tension. It rewards control. It rewards the man who can stare into betrayal and not blink, who can watch chaos rise around him and not shift, who can lose a lover, a deal, a war, and still look his enemies in the eye and say nothing, because that nothing becomes pressure, that silence becomes presence, that absence becomes legend. You want to be truly powerful? Stop arguing, stop chasing, stop reacting, start observing, start holding, start choosing every word the way a general places his troops. Speak less, appear less, feel everything, but show nothing. The next time she tries to provoke you, let her voice fill the air and respond only with your eyes. The next time a rival spreads lies, say nothing and keep moving as if he never existed. The next time the world tries to bait you into proving yourself, laugh silently, because you are not here to explain your worth. You are here to let the silence carry your weight. This is your final law. Move in silence, rule in stillness. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them fear what you're planning. Let them feel your presence long after you've left the room. If you feel this in your bones, if you're done being emotional when others want control, if you're ready to let the world adjust to you, comment below, I move in silence. I rule in stillness. Then close this video and begin your training in the only power they can't mimic, calmness under pressure. Not to be liked, not to be seen, but to be obeyed.